Mashpee, Massachusetts, in the town hall. This videotaped interview is being done by members of the Ashby Historical Society participating in the United States Veterans History Project. And that's a project in which our veterans have been asked to share their stories while they were in the armed services. The tape that we're making will be kept here in Ashby, and then it will be listed and cataloged at the Library of Congress forever. So today with us is Mr. Francis Mathieu, being interviewed by Janet Humphreys with Ann Hayes at the camera. And Mr. Mathieu, how long have you lived in Ashby to start?
Oh, 38 years.
38 years.
About 38 years, yeah.
And the war you were in was?
In 48, say to 51. I was there till 51. I got out in November 51. That's when I came back. And I came back to Pittsburgh. That's where I was living before I went into service. I had originally signed up for 2 years, hoping to get discharged in 2 years. But they wanted me to go to officers candidate school, and I refused because I was only going to be there for 2 years, and if I did this, I would have had to extend the enlistment. I didn't want to. But a year down the road, the Korean War broke out, and I was sent anyway.
This was
so
in the
I
Army?
had to stay.
This was in the Army?
This was in the Army. Yeah, I was in the Army. So I was at Fort Benning, Georgia at the time, and they says there was an alert. Everybody was, all leaves were canceled. So we had to get ready to get on this troop train. Troop train was going to San Francisco, across the states. So that took about a week, I guess, to get there from Fort Benning. I don't know why, but it took that long, but they did.
I guess that's an adventure on a troop train.
Yeah, that was an adventure in itself. But anyway, that was my first trip on a troop train. And it was, you know, they had kitchens set up in the freight cars, and this is like something you've never seen. I helped to set up these kitchens because in Fort Benning, I was a company carpenter. That was my job. So I had to help to set up these kitchens, these portable ranges in the freight cars so that they could cook on these things for all these troops. Troops would go right through the cars and find a place to eat and come back out through. But like you said, it was an experience, and it was interesting because, you know, we was young. I was young then, you know, probably 19 years old, so everything was new. It was strange. So we got to California, we stayed there for a few weeks, and then we got on a troop ship, and I don't know the name of the ship. It was a general ship. It was a USS General something, but I can't remember it. Who cared? We wasn't coming back anyway. That's what we figured. When we was sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge, everybody looked at the bridge, says, well, you know, after the Second World War, you know, this was after the Second World War, so everybody says, well, the Second World War lasted quite a while. Some of us won't come back. So.
Let me get the timing straight. How far into the war were we when you went? Were you one of the, I can't remember the dates.
Yeah, I would say that we were some of the first, I would say first troops. I was with the 3rd Division. As a matter of fact, that division is in Iraq right now, that 3rd Division. And I got a picture with a patch on it here someplace. But I was with the 15th Infantry Division Headquarters Company at that time. And we sailed into, I thought it was Incheon Harbor, maybe it was Wonsan Harbor, I don't really remember now. I didn't have any maps back then, being only a private, so it wasn't allowed such
luxuries.
amenities. So anyway, we went over the side, down nets, into these LSTs or LCVMs. We landed into Incheon, and there was no fighting. We thought that we was going to have to fight our way through there, but we didn't. It was kind of pretty well opened up. So we marched right through it, and we started for North Korea. We started up the road for the Chosin Reservoir. It seems like there were some troops up there that were already caught up there by the Chinese. The Chinese were starting to come in, and this 3rd Division was supposed to go up there and get them out. So how many of our division went up? I don't know. I know the 15th went up, and it was cold.
So,
I still get tight moments.
Are your feet still cold? My husband was in Korea, and
Very
he still
cold.
hasn't warmed up his feet.
Yeah, well, I will agree with that. The weather, I don't know why, but it seemed like it was colder there than anywhere else. Maybe because we were just young and it was a strange place. I really don't know.
There must be some really coldness, because everybody
Very cold.
mentions it.
It was very cold, I thought.
Been there.
And we weren't really geared for that. Actually, we didn't have them packed boots that they have now. We didn't have them at that when we went in. But they did get us some up there. We didn't have some of us had some gloves. And first we walked all the way across the Incheon and up, started walking up the peninsula, and then they brought up trucks from the rear, and then everybody got onto vehicles. I got in it. I had a Jeep. We had a Jeep. I belonged to Message Center. So the Message Center had 2 Jeeps. So we was lucky. We had to carry wire, and I was in the telephone section. They assigned me to the switchboard. So it says you're married to that thing. You got to carry it with you. You got to take it with you. So we had 2 of them, and one of them got shot up so bad we had to leave it. We was taking parts off of one to repair the other, and even that one this one here has got 1 unit missing out of it. But I started to repair them because nobody else, they didn't know what to do. We had, there was a little emergency switchboards that only you could use about 6 telephones on them, and they would light up. But the enemy could see the lights also. So they says, you gotta black this thing out, you gotta get in a hole or whatever. And it was too hard to use. So I started playing with the switchboard and I got it working. So we disconnected the units that were no good and got it going. And they says, hey, that's good. So.
That's good. Well, you were describing earlier how heavy that was to
Well,
carry.
I really can't remember the exact weight to it. I would say 50, 60 pounds, somewhere along in there. It was pretty heavy.
How did you carry your ruck and that
What's that?
How did you carry your rucksack and that?
Well, when we got the Jeep, we just put it in the Jeep.
So you were able
We
to...
just you take it off and you get in the Jeep. You put it in the Jeep, and the sack, and when we went down over the sides from the big ship, we went down over nets. Mm-hmm. Go down these nets, the huge nets that hang all the way down, and then they just dropped all of this equipment down with a rope. And they let us down into another one with you had your pack, your rifle. I had a carbine. I was lucky I didn't have to carry a heavy rifle, but the carbine was big enough really. I was like one of the shortest person in the whole battalion.
Carrying the biggest load.
Yeah. So we wound up in this, I think it was Tokori, I'm really not sure, but it was way up, way up there. We spent Thanksgiving up there. And I have pictures of a prison up there that we had I don't know, they're in here somewhere. Exactly where they are, I don't know.
It's in the bag.
They're in the back? It's in the back. But anyway, they had, I had a camera. I also had a lantern. My mother has sent me one of them kerosene lanterns, you know, with the mantles, 2 mantles, and I donated that to the medic. The medics got that, and I left it there. But anyway, it came in handy to work the switchboard too.
Yeah. So,
At night, we would get into a small Korean house or something, and we would take, that's me right here, that's a picture of me.
you want to get some of these after, at the end of
Can I
this,
get some?
we'll
Okay.
zero in on it. So
Okay,
we
all
can
right.
talk about them, and then she can zero in
Yeah,
on them
all right.
when you're finished.
So what was at the prison?
What's that?
You said you were heading for a prison and you got some pictures of the
Well,
prison. What was
there
at the
was,
prison?
where we were stationed at this, I had a picture of the base where we was, and we was on the side of a river, and I have a picture of a foxhole that I dug.
I saw that. We
And-
passed that because I saw it. It said, built his own foxhole right there.
There you go, right here. That foxhole was built in I built that into the side of a banking, and I took stones, piled stones right up, and they thought that was like one of the best things we had. For a while, we used that for the switchboard. We put the switchboard in there because you should hear it was big. It was kind of large, you know. And this was facing the river. There was a river out there that was about, I'd say, 30 feet wide, and it was about 4 or 5 feet deep. And I'll tell you a little story there. We went out there. It was coming on Thanksgiving. And the colonel wanted everybody to be nice and clean for Thanksgiving because we was going to have a hot meal. They were going to sit down in the kitchen. We had planes were flying into that base where we was. It was like sheltered between the mountains. There was mountains all the way around it, but they were able to get in there because the Chinese weren't. We had the perimeter pretty well secured. We thought we did. Well, anyway. The planes used to come in there, not big ones, but little ones. They'd have supplies. They'd bring in the supplies. So the colonel wanted us to get all cleaned up. So they says, everybody go in, get into the river. And it was ice cold. I mean, there was snow on the ground. Thanksgiving, there must have been 6 or 8 inches of snow. And we decided, we was in the wire section, and I had my foxhole right next to the river, and you could almost walk into it. I had made a little entrance where they could get in there, and we had one guy that jumped in the river and he couldn't get out. And it was the funniest thing because we thought he was going to drown. He couldn't. There was no way. The current of the river was so fast; it was just sweeping everything down the river. Even the stones on the bottom. It was like 4 feet deep, and you could actually feel the stones moving down the river. And the sides of the river was frozen, so he couldn't get out. So we had, it's a good thing we had a roll of communications wire, and we threw the wire over to him, and he was able to get onto the wire, and he wrapped it around his wrist, and we pulled him out of the water. And the bankings were straight up and down like that, like 4 feet. And the water was just running down. The water didn't freeze. It was running so fast that it didn't freeze. Yeah. And But we went into the river, but I'm gonna tell you, everybody had a piece of wire. We had a wire.
Talk about the two wires and how we changed it for one.
Well, yeah, after we was over there, they sent us out to reclaim wire. I was in a wire section. The switchboard was attached to the wire section. We have, I get pictures of here's wire. This is wire here, rolls on rolls, and we put it on the back of the Jeep. Well, here's one to lay-in wire, and they sent us out to pick up reclaim wire. So we run across this village that there was a lot of Chinese in that area. They were coming down at that time. That was just before we left this base to come down. They were using only one wire. And we thought that was kind of strange. How could they use one wire on a telephone? And we had to use two. So we got to figuring it out, and if we had something to test a wire, we could tell which wire was the dead one and which one was the one in use. So we did. We tested a wire. We got a system where we could test a wire, and we would stick a long bayonet in the ground, and that would be a ground wire. So you only needed one wire to communicate. So after a while, we did this. We went out to collect wire, and we wondered why we had to use two wires, and these Chinese were only using one wire. So we latched onto that system, and we used that quite a bit. And there was another time we went out to pick up wire, and we run into this village, this North Korean village, and these people were helping us, so pick up the wire, and we would splice it to make sure that it had good splices on it, and we was able to use it again. And we had passed out cigarettes. There was about 15 or 20 local people, and they were, when we went into the village, they were actually cutting a log. They were cutting a log. They were sawing a log. It must have been as big as this table, and it was up in the air, like 4 feet high. How they got it up there, I don't know. But they were up there, and there was people lined up in lines on both sides, and these people had a crosscut saw, a regular crosscut saw, and the middle of the crosscut saw was like 18 inches wide, and they were people on top and underneath, and they were making boards a ½ an inch wide with this saw.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I came from a farm over here, and I know what logs are, and I know what boards are, and I hauled logs, I chopped wood, and I did all of this. So anyway, I thought this was very interesting. But anyway, when we was picking up wire, we had recruited some of these people, and we passed out cigarettes. And we noticed that this one old guy, nobody ever lit a cigarette. Everybody, we had all lighters. We used to drop them, Zippos. We used to drop them in the fuel tank in a truck and in a Jeep and get a gasoline, and that would fuel your Zippo. Well, anyway, we was watching this guy. We said, well, how does he light his cigarette? We don't know. So we gave him cigarettes. We passed them out again, and we watched this guy. And he turned around. He was all by himself all the time. He was an older gentleman, and he would get a cigarette going. Nobody knew how. So finally, we had to get him aside, because we didn't know some of these people were collaborating with the Chinese already. So we kind of integrated them a little bit, So anyway, we come to find out this guy had a little, like a little bag, a pouch, and he had a piece of flint. He had some cotton batting soaked in some kind of a material, I don't know what, but he would take a little bit of this and with a little flint, and he would rub it on this piece of steel, and that's how he got a cigarette going.
Maybe it was sappy.
I mean, we tried to bribe him to get this thing from him, this material, and he would not let it go. we wanted to give him, we had pitched in and we had, 5, 6 lighters, we wanted to give it to him. No way, he wasn't doing it. He would not give it up at all. But, I mean, actually seeing this, I have to mention that because, I mean, there was a lot of things that, there was one time over there, they were hauling rice. They were hauling rice with trucks. They had 1.5-ton trucks. The Chinese, the North Koreans. And they were shipping rice from South Korea up to North Korea. They were helping us at that time, so there was a convoy of rice. And these guys, I would say there was at least 5 ton of rice, big bags. They were like 4 feet square, made out of rattan or something. And they were moving rice. And before I went into service, my grandfather had an old 34 Chevrolet truck. Up the road comes this Chevrolet truck. It didn't have any radiator, it didn't have nothing in the front, but I could tell by the fenders and the mirrors on it. I says, the cab was there. I said, that's my grandfather's old truck. They had inside of the engine compartment was a 2-cylinder with balance wheels on the side. This was powering this truck. And I said to the guys, he'll never make the hill. They were going, we had to get off the road so they could get through. And we watched this thing, and it went all the way up the hill. It was keeping up to the rest of them. I says, that guy.
He must be powered with something.
I said, I don't know who put that truck together, but whoever it was, he was a pretty good mechanic. And I couldn't believe it. I wish that I had my camera at that time, but there was a lot of pictures. There were a lot of pictures that are not here. I don't know. My sisters probably got them, my brothers. I don't know.
So, I want to get back to...
Yep, going back.
You were talking, the Chinese, when you first went there, the hordes hadn't started coming over. Did you experience any of that? I mean, your battalion was...
Yeah, I didn't really... Thanksgiving Day, as it was when we was up there, we spent a lot of the day putting dead people into sleeping bags.
Coming from where? I mean,
coming from the Chosen Reservoir. Up, we had went up to try to get the Marines out of there, and seemed like, I think it was about 2 days before Thanksgiving, or 3 days. It could have been a week. I can't, the time. I just don't, you don't pay attention to the time. So anyway, they went up there, and I was supposed to go, and then they says, no, you're not going. You have to stay on the switchboard. So,
yes, that's
so
correct.
sometimes we had to spend like 24 hours. We was on that switchboard 24 hours. You didn't get off of it. You doze off, and then somebody'd come in and wake you up. I mean, but we was on the switchboard for hours and hours and hours at the time. So, and a lot of times we would repair radios at the same time. If switchboard wasn't busy, they had little drops on the switchboard, so you could tell when somebody was calling, and you'd ask who they wanted, and we would switch them over to who they wanted. But anyway, they had went up there, and they got ambushed by the Chinese, and they got pushed back. So they went up. They stayed there till dark, and then a lot of people didn't come back at all. So the next day they went back up again, and they found most of the rest of the convoy that was started up there, and a lot of the dead were buried there, and a lot of them had. I remember this one guy, Sergeant Clegg. He had a pin, he had a ribbon, I don't remember what it was, but anyway, it was pinned through his upper lip, and we thought that was terrible. And like I said, we helped the day before Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving Day. I think there was still some dead out there that they were all piled up like cordwood. And I don't know what happened to the bodies. I can't remember. I get busy around different things, and you just didn't keep track of it. There was some of the Korean Marines got out of there. They came down, and I was amazed at the vehicles they were driving, because I mean, the vehicles was in such bad shape.
One wonders how they could make it.
They will hardly run. And anyway, we had taken a few prisoners in, and these Korean Marines got into the prison one night, and we heard this guy screaming, so a whole bunch of guys went out there. Like I said, I was on the switchboard, so I couldn't leave, so they went out there, and they found these Marines beating this prisoner with a bicycle chain. I mean, that was really something to see. We went up the next day, and the guy was, just sitting there in a compound. That's when I took a picture of that compound. And I mean, you just don't forget these things.